AEA staff support some of the best work happening in school buildings all over the state. We're going to take our listeners on the road into these buildings and talk to AEA and district staff about partnerships making a difference for kids. On the last episode, we spoke with Rich McGrath about the power of co-teaching. We found that students gained a lot from a teacher who is supported by just one additional educator. What do you suppose happens when a teacher gets support from not one, but over a dozen AEA staff members? Meet Quinn, a 9-year-old student with significant learning disabilities attending school in a general education setting at Highland in Riverside. Terry, Tina, and I hit the road in Riverside, Iowa. I was thankful for the opportunity to meet Quinn, and I was thrilled to see her in a gen ed setting, surrounded not only by staff and teachers, but also her peers. After meeting the star of today's episode, I was finally ready to sit down with her co-stars and talk about how they supported her learning. So Tina, Terry, talk to me a little bit about the school district, what our relationship is like with Highland, and then give me a little information about Quinn.
Sure. We've had a pretty good relationship collaborating with Highland, especially at the elementary. We've been really pushing into the special ed classrooms, and with the principal and the whole team, we've really been trying to design better practices around the SDI framework. And so with Quinn, it's been extra interesting because with all of her complex disabilities that she presents with, it's really pulled a really big team together. So when you go in today, you're going to see all the different people that are there to support and collaborate and really build an individualized plan that's really designed for Quinn.
All right, great. And so what are some of Quinn's challenges?
So Quinn is one of our complex needs kids. She has a team that consists of needing OT, PT, deaf and hard of hearing. She has also the vision. She has cortical visual impairments. She has a cochlear implant. So she's a very complex little kiddo. She also has the use of mobility through a wheelchair. So very low communication skills. We would call her nonverbal. So she uses a communication pod. So you're going to see all of those pieces in work today. Our vision itinerant, Lori Banos, does a lot of work with the teacher using light in order to get focus for the different pod pieces that she works with for communication. You're going to see a lot of complex people working for this little one.
So first thing, let's introduce ourselves. I'm John Speer, Chief Administrator.
I'm Ann Slaba, the speech language pathologist with Grantwood AEA. I'm Cindy Seahusen. I'm with the special ed literacy team.
I'm Terry Knipper. I am a special ed consultant, but I'm also the alternate assessment lead and the SDI lead.
I am Brooke Henze. I am the special ed teacher for Highland Elementary.
Quinn's special ed teacher, Brooke, has been described as the quarterback of this team. I asked the group how our staff helped Brooke succeed in teaching a student with such complex learning needs.
It takes a lot of people.
Yes, I think the core IEP team makes up about 16 people who come to the IEP team meetings. And then just from there, we meet just the four of us, typically with monthly meetings, along with our vision and hearing people to plan our lessons and brainstorm and problem solve.
And then you take all that information and you take it back to the classroom teacher and you guys collaborate so that she can do a lot of those things that typically happened in a self-contained classroom in the past are now happening in the general ed classroom for Quinn.
You know, probably 20 years ago, I'll just pick that as a frame of reference, Quinn probably would have done little or no academic work whatsoever. It probably would have been mostly just integration so that she's around, peers her age. And that's not the case here. I think it's really important for regular ed teachers also to understand that Quinn does and can learn. If you don't spend very much time around Quinn or a student like Quinn, you might not really know, is there really learning going on? Obviously there is.
I think that was our first conversation. If you give a moose a muffin, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
And at the very end, the punchline, and I giggled because she had made a reaction, and you looked at me like, what was that? And I'm just like, she totally got it. She got the punchline. And I think that was our very first interaction. And it was that where seeing it from a different lens and having, then that started our conversation of how does Quinn communicate? Right. And man, I think she got that punchline. And you're like, oh, maybe she did.
In spite of being nonverbal and having various learning barriers, these students should not be underestimated. The key is understanding all the ways they can communicate. The more we can emphasize that, the better.
I just think it's also important to recognize that, there are going to be setbacks. It doesn't always go smoothly. And what some people think is well, that was just a little step. Right. That's a huge step for a child with very complex needs. Like, this is a victory. This is a celebration.
I think when you think about the students who have these complex needs, is we really need to think about the rigor. Mm-hmm. So they have to have the same amount of rigor as the students, if not more, that we have for our gen ed kids. And when Brooke and I started working together with Ann and Cindy, we sat down and we really looked at what are core standards. And how does that relate back to our students who are on alternate assessment? It's the same core, but it's at a reduced depth. And we look at where our linkage level is. And that's what's been so important, that without this interdisciplinary teaming, we start to miss pieces. And so Brooke has been so vital in her collaboration with Ann on a daily basis, just to be able to look at what's that core standard and what's the rigor that my gen ed kids are getting, and how can we make that happen for Quinn? That's the biggest piece when we think about these kiddos.
You know the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I can't think of a better example of that phrase than what I was seeing demonstrated here.
I think it's been really good to learn, like from Kim Listina. I didn't know, this is the first time I've learned, I have a touch cue for her to let her know it's me. I'm touching her hand to her watch. Lori Jenish was very influential in, the right side of her hand is the most movement. So getting her to raise her hand to say, I have something to say, so we can grab her pad. And just how, what is Brooke's role when we're doing this lesson? What is my role? Brooke and I, we just kind of pass the torch. Okay, it's going to be her turn to lead. That's what we're doing with the lesson plans. And just what do we need and how is that going to look like? And away we go.
And it's taking not only literacy and math and writing and all of those things, but it's looking at what is the main thing for Quinn. And for Quinn, it's to communicate. We're trying to get her to be able to communicate. And that's the level she's at. And so her whole day is working on that. So using the type of core words that are going to give her the most bang for her buck, and incorporating that into classroom routines and things like that.
And then letting her gen ed teacher and the kids, they've grown up with her, but how does Quinn communicate? What does that look like? Whether it's a movement or whether it's the yes and no. I think Brooke has gotten really good at recognizing her movements and being able to interpret what is Quinn talking about, especially the movement, the body movement.
And communication is all throughout that.
Yeah. We've talked about the core vocabulary, and she does have some of those pictures. And she does have two different communication systems going on. She has a single page or one picture pod. We're trying to make those connections with her. So that's about 25% or so that's incorporated. But the one with the high contrast pictures is called a companion pod, and those are the pictures we're pulling off. And she's got the flashlight and shining it on there, and that's what we use in our lessons, and we'll figure out which core words we're going to use.
Much of how Quinn communicates is through a flip book like Pod, filled with pictures and phrases. I was curious how they decided exactly what words this team chooses to work on.
So for the pod, it has fringe words and core words in it. We focus on core per our literacy person people over here. However, the School for the Blind and Vision Impaired also do want us to work on the fringe, so we combine both of those together. So for Quinn, it's easier for her to understand those fringe words because they're not as complex. Like hat, she is able to feel that, unlike the word put. She's not able to comprehend what that is. So
it's abstract.
Yes, we have to model what every core word is. So when we do put, we have to make sure we're putting things on Quinn and putting things on everything. Or when we like stuff, we have to like a food or dislike. We have to make sure that we're eating and actually making it very concrete.
Tell them about your ice cream.
Yeah, so when we did ice cream, we had an ice cream of strawberries. We made sure that we liked ice cream And we also linked in coins through our alternate assessment EE standard, which was showing interest in coin-based activities. So we made ice cream with strawberries, which was our unit, and then we exchanged money, and then we just looked at our coins and counted it with our touch cues and linked that back in through counting, and then it showed interest in coin-based activities. So we hit on counting, which was one alternate assessment standard, hit on counting, and then hit coins, and then we were able to then link it back to strawberries and link it back to the word like.
It's hard to believe, but Brooke is only now in her first year teaching, a student with significant learning disabilities. I asked her if she was surprised by the number of people her support team.
Yes, very much at first.
Yeah.
But it's been really nice being able to have all these people who are willing to come help, especially with all the math and literacy and the communication, just because a lot of people know what they're doing and are willing to help.
And because of the kinds of things that these guys are doing here, that's been a huge thing, and she's increased her skills this year a lot because of all that collaboration and because of mom seeing that this is really making a difference.
What's so special to me is the amount of people jumping in. And everybody has a role on the team. Everybody is right there to jump in. Everybody's got great ideas. And I think about so many of our teachers that are brand new like you are. They feel so overwhelmed. And there's so many moving parts and there's so much going on. And the team that's rallied around her has supported that effort. But I think about our AEA capacity and building our teaming so that as we start to work with more teachers in the districts, there's the same atmosphere that's going on. In one 45-minute session, we sat down, it's like, all right, let's look at this. And you had so many ahas in that first conversation. And that's what we need from our AEA staff too, to be able to sit back and go, oh, I get it. That makes sense.
There's a lot Brooke and this team should be proud of, but I asked Brooke what makes her most proud.
The thing I'm most proud is that Quinn has gone up on every scale on the ELAA assessment.
Yes.
From fall to winter, and we have not tested yet for spring, but I'm hopeful that she will at least grow a little bit again.
So seeing that progress is really exciting, right?
Yes, and I know that also made mom happy too.
Right.
I know she made the most growth for scale 6, which is our communication. So
Yay!
Yeah. Seeing that growth has been really nice.
All of this is incredibly good news, but I thought I'd end the conversation asking about another bit of good news I had heard about Quinn. Earlier, we were talking about Brooke and Make-A-Wish, and she's going this fall, I think, on a Make-A-Wish trip. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so Quinn will be going to Disneyland in October with her family as a Make-A-Wish. So her family and all of her nursing staff will be going to Disneyland.
And then you wanted to go as well,
Well,
right?
I just thought that was another great opportunity for be an agency directed trip because we need communication, we need her literacy, the switch.
We did it all.
Well, her AEA team won't be joining her on her trip to Disneyland. But nonetheless, I couldn't be more happy for Quinn and all the opportunities she's being given. On my way out, I thanked Terry and Tina for hitting the road with me and asked them what drives them to do this work.
Even though children with significant disabilities is only about 1 to 2% of our population in our 32 districts, we have about 190 teachers that are learning how to support students with this good instruction. So it's really important that we coach and we're prepared to support them.
And we need to make sure that our students are getting a high quality education regardless of their ability or disability. And so for students that are significant complex needs, we really need to focus on that core and how our assessment, our alternate assessment, connects back to core, and that our kids are getting that same education regardless of where they're at in the school system.
Grantwood AEA's mission is to ensure success for all learners. This team is demonstrating that admirably. I'm John Speer, and this has been On the Road in Riverside, Iowa.